Christina. So before we turn the time over to TC, I do want to introduce him briefly. TC is one of the most well-known Utah directors of this generation. Throughout his 40 years of filmmaking, TC has worked on dozens of film projects, mostly as a writer, director, and cinematographer. His name is behind film titles like 17 Miracles, Ephraim's Rescue, The Cokeville Miracle, The Testaments, The Work and the Glory, Forever Strong, National Geographic's Sea Monsters, Disney's Roving Mars, the family films Buttercream Gang, Mouth of Babes, and TC can't wait for the pandemic to be over so people can start going to the movies again. Most recently, TC wrote and directed The Fighting Preacher, which is a new personal favorite. TC was a recent guest on our Moral and Ethical Leadership podcast and calls his home the Christensen compound, where both his children live nearby. I wonder if his children would call it that as well. TC also enjoys playing tennis and pickleball at his court next door. Welcome, TC, and thanks for being with us. We'll turn the time over to you.
All right, thanks, Lant. All right, everybody. I'm going to act like I know something, which I don't, to tell you about. But for the first thing I want you to know is I'm kind of a goal-oriented person. And being that it's just soon now after January 1st, I want you to know that I set a goal this year. I said, okay, 20 pounds. Come on, I can do it. I can lose 20 pounds this year. Well, I'm happy to report to you, here we are 6 weeks into the year, and I'm doing pretty good. I've only got another 30 pounds left to go. Well, we're going to talk about, is there any way you can hear laughter through this thing?
Yeah, we just have to unmute.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Tough audience.
Yep.
Here's the setting for my talk today. The Willie and the Martin companies, they're in trouble. And it's the end, it's getting toward the end of the season, and they're still a long way from here. And Levi Savage was not the only person who realized that. There were others. I'm first going to show you a clip from the film about him having a talk with another sub-captain, Millen Atwood, about the plight that they found themselves in.
August 11, 1856. Florence, Nebraska Territory. Last possible sight to winter. Worries abound that we likely will get caught in wintry weather. I spoke with Millen Atwood, another sub-captain.
Since I have been a member of this church, with all my experience, I have never been placed in a position where things appear so dark as to take this company through at this late season of the year.
My fear is that when faced with distress and starvation, even good men turn and become something closer to a wolf than a human. I have seen it.
Remember the words of Moroni, who teaches us.
Toward evening, we held a meeting. Brother Willie exhorted the saints to go forward, regardless of suffering, even to death. He then gave me the opportunity of speaking.
Sisters, we must strengthen our faith, that our resolve will not fail. Brother Levi Savage, would you care to address us?
If I speak, I must speak my mind. Let it cut where it would.
Brothers and sisters, I propose that we wait until spring to make this journey. I feel that if we continue in this late season, we shall endure much hardships. We are liable to wade in snow up to our knees, then lay ourselves in a thin blanket and lie on the frozen ground for a bed. We are destitute of much clothing and could not carry it if we had it. The handcart system I do not condemn. It is the lateness of the season. If the weak, old, and sickly continue in this late season, their bones will strew the way.
The God I serve is a God that is able to save to the uttermost. Levi Savage is an opposer of those who are placed over him, and I call him to repent. Now, those who desire to continue on towards Zion, raise the shown hand. Thank you.
What I said, I know to be true. But seeing that you are to go forward, I will go with you. Help you all that I can. Work with you. Suffer with you. And if necessary, I will die with you. May God, in His mercy, bless and preserve us.
August 17, 1856. This afternoon, the first and second hundreds moved out.
So here's my view of what happened. Captain Willie, he's the boss. He goes to Levi Savage, the employee, and he says, hey, do you want to give a talk? You want to talk? Yeah, but if I do, I'm going to tell what I think. Okay, go ahead. And then Levi says what he feels is right, and Captain Willie reams him for it. It brings to mind immediately to me Vince Lombardi's quote. You ever heard this? Praise publicly, criticize privately. Not so much right there. He got told where the bear sleeps right there in front of everybody. But then what happened? Levi humbled himself and he said, okay, I'll do it. I'll go with you. I'll do whatever it takes. So what lessons are there in this? I'll tell you one. Maybe some of you have read or heard Elder Uchtdorf's talk. This was in October 2014. He gave a talk where he talked about the Last Supper. And the Savior said to the 12, one of you is going to betray me. And instead of doing what we normally tend to do, oh, I'll bet it's Matthew. He's been acting up lately. Oh, that Judas. Oh, man. Instead of that, the apostles turned to the Savior and said, Lord, is it I? They turned inward and said, am I the one that's going to do this? Rather than pointing outward. That's humility. That is a great quality. And Levi Savage had many great qualities, but I think you'd find humility one of the top of the list with him. we've probably all heard this quote. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. That's a byproduct of humility. Well, I was determined to show this aspect of humility in Levi Savage. And I cast Jason Wade, who's a terrific actor and a terrific person, to play that role. And he and I talked quite a bit about he had to portray humility. Well, when we filmed that scene I just showed you, he did great, but every once in a while, Jason would say something like, "I'll go with you, I'll die with you." And then he'd look over at Captain Willie and kind of go, you know, kind of like, "Yeah, I'll do it, but And we did take after take. We kept at that until what you saw there was about take 8, when I felt like Jason really encapsulated that concept of humility and just said, bowed his head and said, "Yes, I'm going to do whatever it takes." Well, I think Levi Savage would have thought that this was all behind them at some point, but it wasn't. A little later, it came up again. I'm going to show you what happened.
Elder Richards and a few other leaders from the British mission passed through camp, fast-tracking ahead to advise the saints in Salt Lake of our coming. A general meeting was called. Elder Richards had been advised of my comments about waiting till spring. I believe he thought my words divisive.
Those who presume to counsel the Lord and his duly appointed servants may do so, if they wish. But they will not prosper. We must rely on the goodness of God and not the wisdom of man. Levi Savage. The goodness of God will move us forward.
I ask Brother Richards and each of the saints forgiveness for all that I have said and done wrong.
Again, Levi Savage humbles himself and apologizes. I ask forgiveness to all the saints for all that I have said and done wrong. I couldn't tell you how many times, with being involved with these films and out speaking and so forth about this, I have had people say to me, "You know what? It's too bad that they didn't do what Levi Savage suggested they do. He was right. He was the one that was right. He was so right." Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about that. About, was Levi Savage so right? First thing, here was the Levi Savage plan. Wait until spring. Well, let me tell you a few realities about that. Wait where? These saints are now in Nebraska, which doesn't even have any kind of a town. It's just like a little few settlers that live there. For them to go somewhere where there was any support and any people was back to Iowa City, 2 months back in the same direction they just came from. And then when they get there, They don't have any money. There's no motels there. Where are they going to stay? They don't have any place that they can just hole up and say, oh, okay, now it's winter. Let's just stay here for a while. 10 years earlier, in 1846, when the Saints were coming west and they knew they were going to have to stay somewhere through the winter, which became winter quarters, they planned for it. They knew they were going to have to do it, and they had cabins, some amount of cabins built. There were some crops planted for them to sustain them and so forth. Still, it was a terrible winter. And of the 2,500 people that were there at winter quarters in 1846, 359 of them died. And here now we've got a group of over 500 people, and they don't even know where they would stay for if they had stayed through the winter. And then for those who would have stayed, and now they've made it through on the Levi plan, when would they have left? Well, say they're in Nebraska. Now they're going to finally, it's getting to be spring, they're going to leave. When would they have left? I'll tell you when they would have left. As soon as they could, as soon as they possibly could. Because they're starving and they need to get going and they need to get on that trek and give people a goal and get them moving toward Zion. Well, so say they'd left in March. That would have put them in those high mountain passes of Wyoming in May, somewhere in May. You know what happens in those high mountain passes of Wyoming in May? We did another film that was mentioned, The Cokeville Miracle. That's Cokeville, Wyoming. Cokeville is only not very many miles from the old Mormon Trail. That incident that we portrayed that happened in Cokeville, Wyoming, happened on May 16th. It was 1986, but still May 16th. Guess what happened that day? It snowed. In those high mountain passes, it snows clear through the end of June, typically. So they've waited, they've starved, they did it, and then they'd go, and they have a very high likelihood of they would have had the same problem that they had by continuing on the trek. I was giving a fireside a few years ago and did a question and answer thing, and a lady raised her hand and said, why do we honor these people? Why do we get together and talk about these people? They just made one foolish mistake after another, and then we get together and we honor them. Well, that's one point of view, but I'll tell you what, that is really not true. That's not the true point of view. Sure, they made some mistakes and did a few things that, you know, they probably could have done better. But I think for the most part, that group was like what Shakespeare would have called the comedy of errors. They were late leaving Liverpool. Now they're late getting to Iowa City. They didn't have enough wood to make their hand carts. So they ended up using green wood, which had not been cured and was still dry, cracked, and it made all the kinds of problems. They had a buffalo stampede just as they left Iowa City and scattered the cattle and it took them days to go and find them. And just one thing after another happened that wasn't anybody's fault. It was just the way that it lined up. Well, communications were a joke. Like, oh, well, let's get word back to President Young in Salt Lake. And it took months to do that. It took months to get anything back. It's very difficult, I think, for us to try to judge those people and lay any cast of doubt on them and what they were doing. It was such a different time than we live in now. So here's a few of my thoughts about what we've been talking about. In any capacity that you might find yourself in, a business, as a leader, a boss, if you're just a pawn working for someplace, humility. Humility will always serve you and make you a better business person than if you did not have it. In 17 Miracles, I felt like, from my research, there were a lot of examples where it was obvious God was with them and watching out for them. To embody that, I had a character, an actor, Bruce Newbold, who actually played the part, and he was my angel that traveled with them. And he would be there when miracles would happen very commonly, and let us know that these people were being watched out for. Well, at one point, they're cruising along, hiking through, and it's raining and it's cold, and people are starving. And pretty soon there gets to be bickering, and then it gets to be a fight. Well, my character, Bruce Newbold, is standing there watching this happen. And as they begin to fight, he turns and walks away. That was my embodiment of the idea that God does not abide with contention. For us, there's always different ways we can figure things out better than getting in fights and being contentious. And it was the same for those saints. They needed to remain calm and deal with that. Now, I'm no one to tell anybody what you should do, for sure. But you know who is? Davy Crockett. Any of you old enough, 1950s, Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier? Huh? You remember that? I wouldn't miss it. Davy Crockett said something I think is a great application to us and everyone and to what we're talking about here. Let me tell you, this is his exact quote. Davy Crockett said, "I leave this rule for others when I'm dead. Be always sure you're right, then go ahead." That's usually when it's quoted, it's shortened, and it's just said of Davy Crockett said, "Be sure you're right, then go ahead." I think that's terrific advice for Captain Willie, Levi Savage, for all of us in our daily lives. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to do some things wrong, but best you think about it. Do the best you can. Put your best foot forward and make that decision and then go. Just do it. And sometimes you'll be right. Sometimes you'll be wrong. Most of the times you'll have a little of both. But you've made a decision and you go forward. Whew, that was good. I hope that got recorded. I hope there's no problems with the recording on that. Whew. Hey, let's see what questions we have, Lant. Who's going to ask me something?
All right. Well, I dare say that there's a few of us on the call that were alive in the 50s or know about Davy Crockett.
You weren't.
I was not. I was not one of them.
No.
And unfortunately, it's just so much easier to mute everybody instead of hearing loud laughter from all sides. But I assure you it was there. So if you have a question for TC, please enter it into the chat box and we'll get it over to him. Right now, TC, a lot of comments. I don't know if you can see the chat or not, but there's a lot of comments about the impact your movies have had on people's lives, the inspiration they gained, the fascinating case study that Levi Savage is. And thank you for your comments. So a few of the questions.
Let me just comment on that. Thank you, you nice people who said that. And I just want you to know this, that, you know, I really have never confined myself to saying, you know, I'm going to really feature LDS stories and these characters and so forth. What I'm into are great stories. And it just so happens this is where I find them. I think we have in our culture so many terrific stories that I will never run out of them to tell. And so that's just how it's been and kind of continues to go, that I read and I study and I look here and there, and then the one that I find that I really think is great, it turns out to be a part of our history.
Well, and to that point, we have a couple of questions asking about what are you working on now? What are the future projects coming up?
What I'm working on now is my backhand in pickleball, because I'll tell you, there's not much movie making going on, and especially, you know, the films that we make, have such a small margin that the costs involved to do it during a period like this where the COVID creates all these additional costs, not going to take that risk. But I want to tell you about our next film that I hope that we'll get to film this year. Here's my little one sentence plug of it. It's 1939 Germany. Heber J. Grant's the prophet. He sends a message to the mission president in Germany and says, the war is going to start in 3 days. Get those missionaries out. And that's the film. There were so many amazing miracles and James Bond instances and Nazi things that went on that got those missionaries out just in time before the war started.
Wow.
Look for it next year.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. The next question is, what is your biggest challenge in filming a movie? Obviously, COVID could be one of those. Some of the, is it weather? Is it personnel? What's the biggest challenge?
Mostly that I have enough donuts. I run out of them a lot, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. It's money. The finances of my business are very difficult to get the money, make a film that people will support and attend and buy and so forth, and then be able to give the investors back. It's a very slim margin, and being able to make a film with not very much money is really that's the toughest thing.
Okay. Well, and a question came in while you were saying that. Is there a way for the individual out there to donate to a film that you're making or a project?
Boy, that's a very nice, I really about never hear that, but yes, there are ways that people have a way to contact me, maybe through you folks or something that, yeah, we'd love to take donations.
Okay. Well, so I'll just say that if there's anybody on this call that wants to donate, feel free to reach out to us, and sounds like we can get you in contact with TC. Dave asks, what's your favorite movie?
Well, I have to say one of mine. No, I'm not going to say one of mine. I have a list of some favorite movies. I'll just tell you some that just, anytime if I'm watching and flipping through channels, they come up, I sit and watch them. One's Fiddler on the Roof. I just think that is such an amazing story. Well, you've seen it. As a comedy, What's Up, Doc? Just, amazes me how funny that thing is. And anyway, that's a good two. Yeah.
You might be surprised to know that even I have seen What's Up, Doc. I think it was made before I was born, but a lover of old films had me watch it, and I thought it's awesome.
Good. Yeah.
How do you prepare and market a movie based on church history to have an appeal to a broader market?
I don't. I actually don't. That I have worked on it. See, my career was really as a director of photography. That's how I spent many years. And it's only the last 10 years that I've started making my own, but I worked on a lot of other people's. And whenever I saw them try to straddle the creek and like, oh, this is something that members of the church might really feel kinship to, but I'm going to make it for everybody else too. I've never seen that work. And I decided early on, both feet in. This is who I'm making it for. It's you. And then we make it, for me, I feel like I'm kind of an everyman. And if I can please myself, it will please and attract others. But I really don't try to do that concept.
Interesting. Okay. How do you feel about the church, the LDS film scene? What are members looking for?
That's a good question. It's a hard question, like, crystal ball and what's the future and so forth. All I know in my simple mind is they're looking for good stories that inspire. When you finish watching it, you don't feel like you've wasted 2 hours or dirty or whatever. You feel good about the experience you've had. So that's what we try to do.
Yeah, that's definitely been my experience. Let's see, another one. Are you training someone to continue in your work? Anybody, is there a TC Christensen Jr., I guess is what they're asking.
I'm going to die? Is that what you're saying?
It was Brigham that said
that. You saw this mug on your screen and you thought, boy, he better be training somebody.
Time is running out. No, well, let's say it's years down the road, but when that time comes,
okay.
It comes.
Well, guess who's helping me? It's my son. My son Tanner is the editor and computer effects artist on all our films. Is way smarter than me. He's the one waiting for me to be dead, and then he'll raise his ugly head. So there is that in the pipeline.
Okay. So you say there's a lot of stories out there, and a lot of good stories to use. How do you narrow it down to finally the one that you're going to make?
Yeah, well, there's several factors that go into that. One is, I think, again, I'm back to money. Can we pull this off with not very much money? Some stories might be terrific, but they involve the future and the day-to-day, I don't know, all kinds of things that are going to be very expensive to film. I just have to avoid that. I don't know how to pull that off.
Sure.
So that's one aspect. And then really the second and maybe the most important is, does the story touch me? If it does, then I think I can deal with that and put it into a form and then get it on the screen, and hopefully it will touch other people and get them to respond, in the ways that we want them to respond. Those are really the two main things.
Awesome. So I'm sure you're familiar with the Chosen series, and there's a question here. Have you ever thought about crowdfunding sources similar to what The Chosen is doing? Yeah,
That's amazing to me that they're able to do that and bring in enough money, and that's terrific. That crowdfunding stuff has worked for them. I'm in a much smaller pool, and so they can draw on Christian kind of people all over the world.
Billions, yeah.
Yes, we're smaller doing it. That's one aspect. But the second aspect, it's I don't know if you caught any of my squeamishness when you're asking about donations. I don't know, to some extent, I just kind of feel like I need to be a big boy. And if I can't make films that people want to see and will bring money back in, I hate to play the part of the beggar and be going out saying, hey, will you help me make my film? So it hasn't come to that. I haven't needed to do that.
Sure, definitely respectable. A lot of questions coming in, TC, so I'm firing them out here. Is there a movie you would want to remake? Again, I'm not saying that you need to. Somebody's just asking, is there one you would like to remake? Sort of George Lucas style, I guess.
I've had a few of my early short films, people had very often over the years, hey, why don't you make that modern and do it again? My attention span's too short, but I really kind of feel like been there, done that. I want to move to a new thing. There's nothing that I think of as a remake that I've ever wanted to do.
I get it. Another thing, going back to revenue and money, the most difficult part, streaming at home is a growing industry. Do you see home streaming revenue as a more important source of revenue in lieu of theaters?
Yeah, home streaming is really going bigger and great guns. But here's the problem. It has not come close to replacing theatrical, let alone DVD. So, theatrical and DVD are going down and it's going up, but it's not a trade-off yet. We all hope that eventually it will be, but for now, boy, if you're banking on that, you're at very risky territory.
Oh, interesting. I haven't seen that data. So back to the good stories. Have you had any experience with non-LDS actors in your movies, in the sense that are they affected by the story told in these movies?
You know, I started a file years ago, a computer file, because I get asked something like that kind of commonly, or did anybody join the church or gotten active in the church, or I don't know, those kind of things because of involvement in a film. And the short answer is yes, it's a large file. And I'm so dumb, before a meeting like this, I should review it so I could give you a good example. But just know that, yes, I do try to keep track of that, and it has been rewarding in that way. Awesome.
Next question is, and this might need to be taken offline. You might not know it off the top of your head. So there's a participant on the call who is a relative of Crawford Gates, a character in The Fighting Preacher. He's wondering, where did you find the source material to include him in your film?
Oh yeah, that's great. A relative of Crawford Gates. Well, in that film, we show 3 missionaries, and I didn't want them to be just nondescript, you know, Elder Smith, Elder Brown, da da da. I wanted them to mean something to me, and hopefully to the audience or some of the audience. Well, I found 3 ways to do that. One of them was Crawford Gates. I knew of him for many years. When I was in college, he was doing church music and so forth, and was quite well known. And as I interviewed people from the Fighting Preacher story, several of them would mention him. So he had just died when we began filming. And so I called his widow and asked her if she would be okay with me using his name. And she was. Incidentally, the other 2 were, I was raised in Layton, and in our stake presidency as a kid, I knew this my whole life, that member of the stake presidency and the stake president had served their missions at that time in Palmyra. And so as kind of my homage to them, I named them that name. And of course, most people just hear it's Elder Bittner and don't know or think anything about it. But those in the family, you know, are touched, and I've paid tribute to them. So Crawford Gates was one of those.
Yeah, that's a fun thing for family members. So it looks like this could be our last question. Which of your films did you enjoy making the most?
Well, I have to say that, you know, probably the Fighting Preacher, the last one, everything just went well. Movies are known for having a lot of problems and just things that every day explode, and you can't get the work done and so forth. And that film it was the people that we were involved with, you know, we involved quite a few descendants of the Beans, and they were on the set with us. And when you see the extras walking down the streets and the kids in the classrooms, the good percentage of them are actually grandchildren and great grandchildren of the Beans. They provide a great spirit to the set, and I just enjoyed every aspect of it. The post-production, everything just went terrifically. So I'm going to say The Fighting Preacher.
Awesome. Well, that's all of our questions. Any closing remarks from you?
Folks, this was an odd thing. You know, I've spoken about 17 Miracles and the Pioneers many times. When I was asked about doing this, it occurred to me to just, you know, I hope you could tell what I'm mostly doing there is I'm just throwing out ideas and problems and situations and possible solutions, and for each of you to kind of determine what you would do in those situations, and to think about ethics in the way that Levi Savage and Captain Willie, who I really have to defend too. I think Captain Willie was a great person, and he did the best that he could. And he said later he wanted to unify the saints. That's why he did that in public. He wanted them to know, hey, we've got to be together in this. And I'm saying let's go forward. Anyway, I hope that has some effect on you and the way you think about your day-to-day jobs. But if it doesn't, sorry. But that was my idea. But Lant, thanks for having me. It's good to be with all you nice folks.
Thank you, TC. No, it definitely does. Thank you for your comments on humility and contention and the lessons we learned from the story of Levi Savage. As you know, TC, you've helped us a number of times, and in lieu of a gift, we want to give a scholarship away to one of these high school seniors attending a Utah college in your name, and as we've done many times before. So there are a lot of people benefiting because you've blessed our lives. So you're blessing a lot of lives of these students out there from these scholarships. So again, thank you for joining us. And
Lant, thanks so much for that. If you really wanted to really zing me with that, then when you give the award to the scholarship to the student, give him a donut too, because that's me. Okay.
We'll talk to our scholarship chair about that. See if we can.
The donut comes with this.
Yeah, perfect. This from TC himself. And our thanks to Dave Austin for setting us up, Christina for saying a prayer. We do have a giveaway. BYU Management Society branded packing cubes. Apparently they're all the rage these days. And the winner of these packing cubes today is Elizabeth Edwards. Elizabeth Edwards, if you're on the call still, feel free to send me your contact information, a mailing address, email directly to me, and we'll get those mailed out to you. And again, thank you everybody for being with us. That'll conclude our call.
Thanks, TC.
Thanks, Dan.